it's so weird. We praise people for being independent. And then the first thing you say to a single person at a party is, have you met someone? And it's like, it's like so many mixed messages. But okay, so let me ask you to define. Let's go into, you tell me, you're the therapist, but I thought it might be, go into however you want to. But in terms of like, let's say there's someone listening and they're single and they're like, okay, I'm just learning now that this picker thing is kind of BS. Talk about the 2 anxious attachment styles. Now, I don't know if you want to talk about the adult.
We'll do adult. And I want to say this too, because when you said that, I was like, ugh. Made me think of when you're at a party, people are like, have you met somebody? And then you'll hear somebody say, well, when you least expect it, you'll meet them. Just
That's
stop.
A terrible thing to say.
Yes. Just stop wanting somebody. It's like, no, if we cut that off, that is going to lead us less likely to find somebody. Keep it inside your soul that you want to be connected to somebody.
Oh, that's a great point too. Yeah.
But also it's just like kind of rude and it's not helpful.
I was thinking that I'm not, because of my attachment styles and just how I'm wired, I don't relate to the generic, I want to meet someone romantically. I always go, when people say they're like lonely and pining for a relationship, I go, with who?
Right.
Like to me, I have to have a person in mind. And I know that that's like not totally, like 100% on the spectrum of healthy, but I have a billion friendships and I'm constantly connected to other people. Like I am such a love bug and such a social creature. But on the other hand, I do really well. And I don't mean on my own independent alone, but I just do really well without a partner right now. And I have had times in my life where I'm like so fulfilled and happy with like projects and friends and exploring and travel. And people will say, that's great because you're in the when you least expect it part of your life. And I go, well, don't ruin this part where it's like the only payoff for this, quality time with self is that I meet someone at the end. Then that was all worth it. Like, because what if I never do? Then there's just no... Yeah, it's a hard thing to keep in your head that we need connection, but it's also fine if not, right? And it's not the point.
But you're connected. You're talking about like, oh, the only connection is a romantic partner. Well, that's not true because what you just said is a beautiful picture of what it looks like to move from a somewhat anxious attachment to a secure attachment, where I am now connected to other people, but I'm okay self-soothing in myself because somebody who is avoidant, they will over self-soothe. So they're over dependent. And somebody who's anxious will under self-soothe. And the only way to soothe themselves is through one special person.
What I used to be like, and again, I thought it was normal because I don't know, why would I not think this? And also because when you're busy, sometimes it really is just you have not a lot of time. And so in my relationships, it's like I work all day and then I'm doing comedy at night. And I don't have a million hours to see a million friends. And so my partner became my primary sounding board for everything. And it was like, if you had asked me, I'd answer in almost a Larry David way. Like, what? I'm supposed to go home, tell my partner every single thing that happened, every single anxiety I've had. And then I'm supposed to call a friend and say the same thing to them. And then another friend. I didn't know that I didn't even know it was like dumping everything on a partner. I really didn't. And so I had someone point out to me once, like, you're so anxious. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not anxious. I travel all the time. I used to have a fear of flying. Now I don't. I really didn't realize. And I don't think because he could only say you're so anxious. He couldn't expand on it. And I think what his soul and brain and subconscious was trying to say is, you are putting everything onto me, even if it's not big and dramatic, but it would be little things throughout the day. Send a text. Oh my God, the mailman just fucked this up. It was just like every minute there was contact, and there was like, and I honestly, like, I didn't take into account what it feels like to be on the other end because I didn't think it was a big deal. If I send that text, you never have to write back. I don't care. I'm just unloading, And so once I got out of that relationship, which was really, really painful to get out of, it was not my choice. The last few years have been basically pretty much single. And man, I've learned a lot over the last 3 years. I truly now have deep relationships with friends. It's like every day I'm in touch with at least 20 people, whether it's a quick text or something, but there's so much I love you and there's just so much intimacy and I spread it around. like my friendships weren't that deep before when I was in this past relationship. And so what I've gained is a life, you know, and now I can seamlessly see how someone could fit into that in a way. But I never used to understand like shows like Sex and the City where they're like, my girlfriends are my soulmates. I was like, what? I literally didn't get that, you know? And so it's just interesting because it's like, it's these little things that I feel like people don't articulate where it's like, I'm not a love addict. I'm not a whatever. It's like, I literally didn't know that you don't give everything to your partner because it was just common wisdom.
That. Nobody teaches that.
Nobody teaches that. It has nothing to do with what my parents did. It's just, you hear these common wisdoms that are like, your partner should be your best friend. They should be your everything.
They're your other half.
You complete me.
Yeah. This might be a conversation for another day, but like what you're also speaking to is how we used to just think our attachment was based off of our parents or our primary caregivers. Now we're looking at how our attachment system is created off of our life experiences. So if I'm seeing all this content that's saying your partner should be your other half, your partner should complete you. Like,
wow,
then,
no way.
Yeah, so then I'm taking that into my psyche and I'm like, okay, then I'm going to be looking for the person that does these things. And if we look at media, TV, the shows that even like I just went to Disney World with my niece, my two little nieces, and I'm looking at these like princesses and these fairy tales, and I think they're so cute and they're awesome and they're wonderful. But also I was taught how to have relationships through those movies of like your Prince Charming will come and fix you and sweep you off your feet and make everything better. So then you're going to be, look, that's shaping how relationships should be. So if I'm not getting that, then there's a message in my head that's like, well, there's something wrong with me. Why am I not getting that?
It's interesting you say that because honestly, I did not know that we truly are shaped by media because it sounds so trite almost like, oh, come on, how could we be that influenced? I mean, we're not stupid, but it's really good to hear that. I had no idea that that can inform our attachment styles as much as our caregivers. That's wild.
Yeah. And if you look at, I'm so grateful for this, but a lot of stuff is changing, especially in like the younger generation's TV and stories that are being exposed. But if you look at that, the way that relationships were shown and displayed is very unrealistic. And if you are watching that, and here's another thing, somebody who has an avoidant attachment style is going to probably watch a lot of TV because it's a self-soothing and a way to like, avoid and just dismiss life. I'm going to be sucked into that. So that I'm taking all this information in, and then the information that I'm taking in is telling me this is what a relationship looks like. This is what a family looks like. If I'm that young, I don't know how to differentiate between this is not real and this is real.
Wow. We'll continue the interview on the flip side of a quick message from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, it's Leanne Rimes. You know, these days, it is pretty easy to feel overwhelmed and fractured, not only from each other, but ourselves. The third season of my podcast, Wholly Human, focuses on living our fullest and best lives by reconnecting with ourselves and each other to build greater joy, connectivity, and intention. I'd love for you to join me as I sit down with some of the most inspiring and enlightening experts in the fields of self-awareness and healing. Together, we will make more sense of this wild and sacred existence that we all share. You won't want to miss the third season of Wholly Human. Listen and follow Wholly Human with Leanne Rimes on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt, your host for Inventing Anna, the official podcast. From Shonda Rhimes and the creators at Shondaland, Inventing Anna tells the story of a young woman who charmed her way into the pocketbooks of New York's elite.
Was she gonna take off with that $20 million from the banks, or was she gonna pour it into this foundation?
You know, people look at Anna and see what they want to see.
On this podcast, you'll get VIP access to the real people who inspired the television series and to the actors and creatives like showrunner Shonda Rhimes who brought them to life.
We were working on the show while the trial was going on. I remember doing a dramatic reading of Todd's opening statement for the writer's room.
Who is the fake heiress, Anna Delvey? Join us as we unravel the stories behind the story.
Everything's true until it's not, basically, in Anna's world.
Listen to Inventing Anna, the official podcast, every Wednesday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
From Cavalry Audio, the studio that brought you The Devil Within and The Shadow Girls, comes a new true crime podcast, The Pink Moon Murders.
The local sheriff believes there may be more than one killer. It's been 4 days since those bodies were found, and there's no arrest as of this morning.
They were afraid, especially out in that area. What if they come back or whatever?
It scared me to death. Like, it scared me. I was very, very intimidated to live here.
Crazy to think you go to sleep one night, maybe snuggling with your loved one, and never wake up. Or maybe you wake up in a struggle for your life, which you lose.
Join host David Ratterman as he explores one fateful night when evil descended upon small-town Ohio.
Killed 8 members of an Ohio family in a pre-planned execution.
A family was targeted, most of them targeted while they were sleeping.
Follow The Pink Moon Murders on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, well, now take me through the 2 anxious styles.
Okay, so we talked a lot about avoidant, so I'm going to start with the anxious. So an anxious, and there's a great way that I easily differentiate between the two. So somebody who has an anxious attachment style, they are somebody who has been like shown hope and given hope, and then it's been taken away. So they've seen people show up. They've seen relationships work out. They've seen, if we go back to early experiences, their parents are there sometimes. It's like, imagine you play soccer. Like sometimes your parents come to your games and sometimes they don't. So like there's an expectation that they might be there. So I have hope and then it's been taken away. I have hope and it's been taken away. So then when I have the thing I want, the relationship, I become this like stage 5 clinger because I know it's going to leave. I don't know when. So I want to hold on to it as tight as I can right now. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep it here. They kind of have a sixth sense. And this is like, none of these things are bad. I just want to say that too. I'm not like demonizing people for having an anxious attachment. I grew up with a very anxious attachment. It's just their survival strategies, really. So they kind of develop this sixth sense where they're more likely to be able to sense like danger or something off. Their like gut reactions are like really pretty good. However, they kind of move too fast. So they assume too quickly. They don't have this like moment where they can like breathe and just like wait to see what happens. They get that gut reaction. They have to like move on it right then and there.
So do you mean that it could be a gut reaction if I like you, so they could get attached too quickly too, or no?
Well, yes, but that's kind of for a different reason. I'm saying the gut reaction I'm kind of referring to is like that something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Okay, so instead of like just sitting with it, they can't hang, they can't feel their feelings. They got to react.
They have to fix it. They have no ability to self-regulate. And attachment is based off of emotional regulation. And the emotion that we're focused on the most is fear. So they sense fear and they cannot sit with it. So imagine you're texting the person you're dating and you guys are having a conversation back and forth. It's great. Or maybe this is somebody early and very early in dating too.
Yeah.
So going back and forth, the conversation's great, whatever. All of a sudden you see like the ... the bubbles, and then they go away. And then he never responds.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Automatically, I'm making up a story of like, oh, was what I said not funny? Did they not like it? Did I hurt their feelings? Did they decide they don't like me anymore? Like there's 100 stories. When maybe the reality is he dropped his phone in the sink. Or he put his phone down to go for a run. Or he is in a meeting and his boss walked into the room or something.
Yeah.
There's no like reality checking. It's this narrative that something is wrong. And now I have to fix it. So then you end up sending like 15 text messages to this person.
Oof.
You know?
Oof. Yeah.
When really
and in that moment, I mean, what you're saying, you know, we've seen it on TV a million times. Oh my God, did they not like me? Was I not funny? I mean, any human is capable of thinking that, but the difference is I can think that and then put my phone down and make a cup of coffee and go, oh God, I'm so embarrassed. I hope I didn't say anything dumb.
Yeah.
But the person with that attachment style who's not emotionally regulated, they can't. They have to react.
Gotta fix it.
They have to get soothed by that person that made them anxious. Nobody else.
They can't go make a cup of coffee and sit there and just like drink it and feel the warmth and like be in the moment. They have to go fix what they, in quotes, messed up. However, I will say this for anybody who does relate to that. What I always tell clients is You saying one thing like that, like maybe you did say a joke and they didn't think it was funny or whatever. If somebody likes you and they have a secure attachment, you saying one joke that they don't think is funny isn't going to be like, oh, never mind, I don't like them anymore. They're just going to be like, oh, that was a weird joke.
It's so interesting, though, because on the receiving end of that, if that other person isn't secure and they're freaked out by all the texting, it's so funny because it sucks for the anxious person because it really isn't about that person that didn't write you back. You're not obsessed with them. It's all about you.
Am I worthy of being loved?
Yes. And it sucks because it gives us this impression that like they're obsessed with me. And it's like, no, they're
obsessed with themselves.
Like you said.
Yeah.
It's like that whole saying, it's not you, it's me. It's like so true. But you're right. It's like, so they're trying to figure out, am I worthy of being loved? Oh my God. It's so vulnerable.
Well, yes. And both of these insecure attachments, they are both struggling with the same exact thing. Somebody who's anxious, their biggest fear is rejection and abandonment, right? So they're clinging,
but they're gonna make it happen, right?
100%. Because no matter who you are, if somebody sends you 15 text messages in a row, I hope that they would be like, red flag, right? So what you're doing is you're trying to run towards that person and pull them back in, but you're running towards that person and you're really pushing them away. So the thing about that, so that's the anxious person. The avoidant person has the same fear. I don't want to be rejected and I don't want to be abandoned. But instead of them running towards somebody to pull them back in, they're going to run away first. So you can't leave me. Because they never had hope. So go back to the hope. They always lost hope. So if we talk about the soccer game, mom, dad, nanny, whoever it is that's taking care of them, never shows up to the game. They don't even know they have a game. They don't even know they play soccer. So they are not, they're just all over here by themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and run away and get out of this before you can leave me because I know that eventually you will. So I'm going to go take care of myself. I'm going to stop telling mom, dad, nanny, whoever that I have a soccer game because I know they're not going to come. Where the anxious person is going to remind them 15 times that day and make sure that they get there 20 minutes early. And they're going to spot them before the game. And if they're not there, they're going to go call them.
So now let me ask you, what does the secure person who has a normal, healthy fear of abandonment and rejection, how do they feel inside? How do they act on that?
So somebody who has a secure attachment, they grew up with the idea that I am worthy of love and belonging. So they have that. So they can regulate their emotions. They can feel rejected or abandoned, not like it. It doesn't feel good, but they can sit with it and know that this doesn't define me. Breakups can still be really, 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 really hard because they are sad and there's a lot of grief in that and there's a lot in that. And they know that they don't ask those questions. What did I do wrong? How can I fix it? They're just like, it's like what you're talking about. It's like, oh man, that could have been something really awesome. And it's not. And that's a bummer. But this doesn't define who I am. And there will be somebody else. Somebody who's anxious in their head when they're dating somebody and they start to see these like maybe red flag things. And then they start to like cling on to them because the red flag things are freaking them out. They think in their head, there will never be somebody else that will be there like this. I will never find somebody that I can connect with like this. And going back to the fairy tales that we're told, our soulmate, our one soulmate. If I think that we have one soulmate, if I find myself in a relationship and I'm in love with that person, I have to make it work because I have one soulmate and I can't lose my one soulmate.
Right. This is like life or death in a way, like because you're convinced really not even that much based on the person that they're that one chance.
Yeah. And it is life or death because if we go back to our attachment system, we have to be connected to people to survive and to thrive. So in their heads, if this person leaves me, I mean, I felt this. I'll speak for myself. I felt this. The end of a relationship literally feels like I'm dying. Like it physically hurts. And part of that is because the same systems light up inside of our body when we feel emotional pain and physical pain. So I am really thinking I'm going to die. I remember saying like, I feel like I'm dying.
Yeah.
Because, well, if I can't have this person, I won't be able to survive and thrive. I need attachment and connection. But what I didn't know is you can find it through somebody else.
This is a huge question, not going to solve it on a podcast, but But basically, like the generic, like you're not giving someone advice telling them to go do this right now, but like in general, how do anxiously attached people move into secure attachment? What does it take?
Yeah. So it's a good question, and a question that I think a lot of people want to have like a really easy answer to. And the answer is pretty simple, but it's just hard to do. You're not going to heal your attachment through reading a book or listening to a podcast. You might identify it. You might be like, oh my gosh, that's me, which is awesome. Awareness is the first step always. But what somebody needs is they actually need to find a secure base of a human being, so that they can actually feel like somebody isn't going to always leave. Because we've developed this attachment because we had the hope and it left. We had the hope and it left. We had the hope and it left. We need some stability. So what it requires, it requires us to, one, be able to regulate our emotions. Because in all relationships, you're going to have experiences where there's like uneasiness. Right? There's going to be arguments. There's going to be fights. Even with your therapist, I've had times with my own therapist where I was like boycotting her because I was upset. But in my head, it wasn't this relationship is going to end because she said this one thing that hurt my feelings. And now I think that she doesn't like me. And so I'm never going to see her again. It's like, okay, I need a break. We're having like a rough patch. She's going to still be there when I go back though.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So that's what they mean when they say like your therapist can kind of mimic.
Oh, 100%. That's
relationships.
That's
right?
all and that's why therapy is so important when it comes to healing attachment wounds. And I say that knowing that not everybody can afford therapy. And so this isn't the end all be all, but a therapist is literally going to be a secure base for you, which is what we need in life to be able to have a secure attachment. Because you can say whatever you want. I've had clients that have cursed at me and said probably some of the meanest things I've ever heard, slammed my door so hard that the frames fell off the walls. Like I had a client who ran away from treatment. I had to chase her down a dirt road. Like I've had all, yes. I've had it all. But what I will do is I'm still going to show up to your appointment the next time. I'm still going to come back to work. I'm not going to leave unless it becomes like where you're being like unsafe and I have fear for myself. I'm always going to show up no matter what. I'm going to be that secure base that will show you can mess up, you can say things, and I can mess up. I can say things, and we can repair relationships. There can be rupture and I can have repair. And you can do that with people. An avoidant person is going to go repair by themselves. They're like, you're not working out for me. An avoidant person in therapy either doesn't know why they're there because somebody else asked them to go, or it's like annoying to them. We as therapists are like a bother to them. They're annoyed by us. So they're like, we don't need you. As soon as we start to like tap in and they start to feel, and then their footy pajamas start to get kind of like unzipped, they're like, I got to go peace. Bye. I'm going to go figure out this by myself. For them to heal, it's like you have to stay in it. We want you to regulate with somebody. Somebody who has an anxious attachment, they need to learn that they can regulate through relationships and they can regulate alone at times. They don't need everything to be perfect all the time. We can have a disagreement and you can go home, make a cup of coffee, drink a cup of tea, sit on the couch and sit with that feeling. And I'm not going to leave you.
You know, a lot of times people will say, therapy didn't work out for me. I thought the person was this, that, or the other. It's like, but you can actually sit there and say to them, I think you're crazy.
Yes.
I think you're stupid and don't know what you're talking about. Now, maybe you do have a therapist that, it's not everyone's great. But if you have the right therapist, then that's where your jumping off point is together.
God. I have to tell this story because that's exactly what you're talking about. I had a client and we're not supposed to play favorites, but I really loved this client. She was so fun.
I knew therapists had favorites.
We're human too. So there's people that were like, I love working with her. Like she was tough and her transformation was so cool to see. And in the very beginning of our work together, we started doing a timeline because we were going through her trauma. She came in one day and she was like, just so you know, I think this is, can I curse on here?
Yes.
Okay. She's like, just so you know, I think this is bullshit. I don't really understand what you're doing. It's not helping me. And I feel like I'm wasting my money. Like you keep saying all this stuff, but like, do you even know what you're talking about? It was amazing. And we had our whole session that day was all about her confronting me on things and me sitting there and being like, okay, and having a conversation. From then, that moment was like the turning point because she was ready. She didn't even want to come that day. She was like, I was just not going to show up, but my mom made me. And I was like, okay, cool. Love your mom. But she was like, after that conversation, it was like she could trust me because she got to ask the hard questions and I wasn't like mad at her. I didn't like back down and cower. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And that's what I tell all my clients in our first session. Sometimes they forget it is if I'm doing something and you're like, this isn't helping, tell me. Because this is a experiment and this is practice on how we want you to show up in the world outside of this room. So if you can't confront me where you're literally paying me, I'm here for you. Yeah. How are you going to do that with anybody? But I want you to see that you can confront me and you can say whatever you want. And I'm not going to say, get out of my office.
Yeah.
And they need that actual like action. So knowledge is great, but we change our systems, our attachment systems through like actually going through the motions.
So how would someone do it who's not in therapy right now? You know, they're going to go in 6 months, but how can they get started? Can they do this with friends? Can they do it by themselves?
So you can heal your attachment. It doesn't have to be through a therapist. You can heal it through finding secure people in our lives. But we have to be aware of what we're looking for. And this goes to therapy too, because it's true, not every therapist is good. And so if we can find people who feel safe and we can actually be honest about those red flags that we see, then we can learn how to do that through actual relationships in our lives. We don't have to do it in like a therapeutic office. It's just sometimes it's easier that way.
Anxiety Bites will be right back after a quick little message from one of our sponsors.
I'm Jacob Goldstein. I used to host a show called Planet Money. Now I'm starting a new show. It's called What's Your Problem? Every week on What's Your Problem, entrepreneurs and engineers describe the future they're going to build once they solve a few problems. How do you build a drone delivery business from scratch?
Our customers, they want us to do this unbelievably reliably, in the storms, no matter what, and hundreds of times a day.
How do you turn a wild dream about a new kind of biology into a $10 billion company?
We didn't have a particular technology. We didn't have a way of making money. It was a great way to start a company. I highly recommend
What could go wrong? How do you sell millions of dollars worth of dog ramps for wiener dogs in the middle of a pandemic?
We're working with 400 influencers, and the majority of them are actually not a person, but it's actually a dog.
I can tell you right now, the dog ramp guy has some very interesting problems. Listen to What's Your Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sir, we got your test results back, and...
Give it to me straight, Doc.
You have to listen to the podcast Ridiculous News.
Ridiculous News? The podcast? Ridiculous News?
It's a podcast hosted by Bill Worley and Mark Kendall. Ridiculous News.
Those two comedians based out of Atlanta, Georgia?
Oh, so you've heard of them. You know, I always knew you were my favorite patient.
Well, you're the best doctor I've ever had, and yeah, they're hilarious. I love their videos. Bill's actually my cousin. They talk about the news, but not like in a depressing way, you know what I mean? Like they did an episode about April Fools.
Great, you get it. So you need to listen to it.
Well, where do I find it?
You get it wherever you find podcasts.
Oh, like in a cereal box?
Well, no, I mean, that's not where you find a podcast.
Oh, so like in the middle of a tree?
No. Do you know what a podcast is?
Yeah, it's like a shoebox size.
No, not at all. It's something that you listen to.
Huh.
Listen to Ridiculous News on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, the produce aisle.
Absolutely not.
So this thing that Patty Stanger says to people, you know, you have the wrong picker. It does seem almost magical. Like, I don't want to meet people who do X. And I swear to God, it's not like I'm going to like, you know, their profile and reading every horrible thing about them and picking them. It is literally across a bar, I meet eyes with someone, or on an app, we match. How then? How is it so fucking, I mean, it's freaky. I mean, when we talk about psychology, we rarely talk about vibes and spirit. Like, this is almost spiritual or magical or weird. It's freaky. How do we find these people when we really don't want it? Like, literally, how does it work? That I'm across a bar and I find an attachment style that doesn't work for me. what is going on underneath there? How do we sense it?
So there is a part that is like the magical feature, and it is so freaky when you think about it. And it goes back to like